In this video, we're going to talk about debunking the debunking articles. We're going to talk about why sweating out toxins is so important, the pivotal detox project that got us started, how detoxination exploits niacin, advancements over the last 40 plus years that we've been involved with this program, and how I can help improve your quality of life. So people like to send me these debunking articles that basically say that you cannot sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna. And I always enjoy when I receive these because my first response is that's 100% correct. You do not sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna. And then they always respond with something like, but Dan, you wrote the book on it called Sauna Detoxification using niacin following the recommended protocol of Dr. David E. Root. Well, in reality, you have to understand that when they use the word toxins, they are purposefully misleading you. In fact, the actual definition of a toxin is an antigenic poison or venom of plant or animal origin, one produced by or derived from microorganisms and causing disease when present at low concentrations in the body. That's the Oxford version. Now, the Wikipedia version basically says a toxin is a harmful substance produced within living cells or organisms, semicolon. Synthetic toxicants created by artificial processes are thus excluded. So toxicants is the word that we need to understand. But toxicants, once they get into the body, become xenobiotics. So xenobiotics is actually what our protocol is designed to detox. So here's the definition. I'm not going to read it. You go ahead. But it's basically saying that these are foreign substances and they should not be present in the body. Now, one of the things that is important to understand about xenobiotics is most of them, or a lot of them, are lipophilic or fat attracted. So environmental pollutants are approximately 60 to 80% lipophilic or fat attracted. Pharmaceuticals, 40 to 60% of pharmaceuticals are lipophilic, and in fact they're toxic because many are made from petrochemicals. Industrial chemicals, which, by the way, there's probably 100,000 or more chemicals that are actually in the rolls, if you will, in the literature that are really dangerous chemicals. In fact, we have here in California Prop 65, which has over 900 chemicals known to cause cancer, birth defects, or reproductive harm. And these chemicals are typically man-made xenobiotics, and once they get into the body, and they can cause all kinds of conditions, as we'll be showing here shortly. So in general, basically 50 to 70% of xenobiotics are considered lipophilic. Now, why does that matter? Well, for one thing, they're also hydrophobic, meaning that they won't come out through your watery eccrine sweat. So your sweat is essentially 95 to 97% water. Some places report 99% water, but the remainder is salts. But with the toxins that we're dealing with that are lipophilic, they are going to need to find another exit route through what's called sebaceous sweat. And sebaceous sweat is produced by the sebaceous glands or oil glands that produce sebum. And sebum is what is actually going to lubricate the hair follicles. It's going to make the hair and skin moist on the surface and provide somewhat of a protective barrier against bacteria and things like that. But most of all, the sebum, when it melts in a sauna, it's going to help liberate or excrete these toxins from the sebaceous sweat. And you can tell it's a sebaceous sweat because it's a little slicker than just watery eccrine perspiration. You can feel it's actually slicker. So this is the mechanism that we excrete toxins. So your answer to the debunking articles is simply that we are not sweating toxins out through our sweat glands, but we are sweating xenobiotics out through the sebaceous oil glands in the sebum. Now, here's a list of studies that I've put together that are showing that, yes, the sweat is a primary mechanism for removing a lot of different types of heavy metals and chemicals. These are all on our studies page at getdetoxinated.com/studies. So why is sweating out toxins so important? So let's take a look at a fat cell, and this is a rather artistic rendering of one, but you'll notice that the triglycerides are the fat reservoir. That's the actual fat. Then you have the mitochondria. That's pointing to a mitochondrion, a single unit, which are the powerhouses, by the way, of this cell. And then there's a nucleus there and some toxins that have invaded this particular fat cell. But that's because the fat is lipid-based, and so these are very lipophilic toxins or xenobiotics. In fact, whenever I use the word toxins from this point forward, just know that I'm referring to xenobiotics. But the cell membrane is actually very lipid in the middle. On the outside, it's more hydrophilic or water favoring, whereas in the inside, it's more lipophilic. So you'll find that not just fat cells, but any cells that cells have cell membranes that are made of the same type of material, they're also going to be able to store toxins in their outer membranes. So just know that it's not just the adipose tissues that are containing the toxins, but all cells can contain toxins. The liver, the kidneys, organs, brain, all of these areas. In fact, the adipose tissues of the bone, the adipose marrow tissues, they'll store lead, and they'll store gadolinium and some other things. Here's a illustration of what happens when toxins invade cells and they actually cause a lot of damage. And we're going to talk about the kind of damage that you can see with this type of toxicity. So let's talk about the deleterious effects of xenobiotics. They can cause oxidative stress, disruption of enzymes and proteins, xenoestrogen hormonal dysfunction, endocrine disruption, cell membrane disruption, genotoxicity, and they can be carcinogenic, immune system suppression, neurotoxicity, and most importantly, mitochondrial dysfunction. Here I've got studies that have been showing that mitochondria are a target of environmental toxicants. Mitochondrial dysfunction is a hallmark of environmental injury in this study. Here's a roll-up of environmental chemical exposure and mitochondrial dysfunction. So the review of recent literature, and notice this was dated in 2022. Now this is the kind of stuff that we've known since the 1980s. Here's the most important one that I found. Mitochondrial dysfunction is the root cause of many diseases, and I'll qualify that by saying many non-communicable and non-genetic diseases. Here's an example, chronic fatigue syndrome and mitochondrial dysfunction. And this is a brief listing. I'm going to give you a much longer one here in just a second, but this one is showing autism, ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and diabetes are related to environmental toxicants and mitochondrial dysfunction. Now this is a longer list of conditions that are linked to xenobiotics. You can pause this video and read through this particular slide because there are a lot, and I'm sure there's plenty that we've missed. Now I'd like to discuss the pivotal detox project that we did from 2002 to 2007. It was called the New York Rescue Workers Detoxification Project, and this was the pilot project here that was done around 2002 at our center in Sacramento. In fact, these are about the only pictures we have because this place shut down to move everything to New York, where, like I said, there's over 5,000 first responders, volunteers, and some civilians who went through the program free of charge thanks to donations and grants. So this is just an example of one of the saunas that we had. This was actually the second center that we had opened in Sacramento. The study that was done, this is one of several studies actually that were published on the 9/11 project, and you can find this one in our studies page as well. So if you go to getdetoxinated.com/studies, you'll find this particular paper. This is one of our favorite patients, Anne-Marie Principe. She, as you can see, at age 42, she was essentially written off. Her doctors told her that she should go home and take care of her affairs because she wasn't going to make it. Her lungs had filled up from the toxic cloud that came rolling down the streets of Manhattan, and she stepped right into it and couldn't escape. And she basically breathed in so much that her lungs were down to essentially one lung only had about 30%, if not 20% functionality, and that's all she had to breathe with. So her doctor basically said, "You're not going to make it." Anyway, she managed to work her way into this project that we did, and she was one of the first civilians. I think, in fact, she probably was the first civilian that went through the program. And so essentially at age 60, you can see that she's looking very good, alive and well. And in fact, we did a podcast with Dr. Daniel Amen and his wife Tana, where she describes her story. And this is a link you'll find in our or the description of this video. So this video is worth watching just to hear her story. It's an incredible story. So let's talk about now how detoxination exploits niacin. This is a very important aspect of our program because people seem to think that niacin is just a supplement, that it's, because vitamin B3 causes a flush and that kind of thing. And most people only know about the flush. And the flush is a very useful thing for our program because it helps push bloodborne toxins out to the dermal or skin regions so that the sauna can then sweat them out through the sebaceous sweat. But the actual purpose of niacin, we found later, was actually due to what's called rebound lipolysis. You may hear me say lipolysis in the other videos, but just I'm going back to the more appropriate pronunciation. I just kind of like the way lipolysis rolled off the tongue. But here you see an image of somebody pre-niacin and post-niacin, and it doesn't always trigger a flush. In fact, it is very unpredictable. So the program doesn't really use the flush, although for many years, I'm talking decades, it was believed that the flush was the main reason why. Fortunately, though, my father did know about rebound lipolysis, and he understood its mechanisms, which I'm going to explain in greater detail here. But just know that the original Hubbard method used the flush and did everything based on the flush. So we now know that it was actually a useful thing because it pushes bloodborne toxins to the dermal regions, but it wasn't the main reason for the niacin. So what does niacin actually do to cause a flush? Well, it releases what are called prostaglandin PGD2 hormones. And what that does is in the cells of the capillary walls, the prostaglandin hormones, once they get released, they relax the walls of the capillaries. And as you can see in this illustration, it allows a lot more red blood cells to flow through. And this is going to help push a lot more blood out to the skin layers where we need the bloodborne toxins to be pushed or delivered to. All right, so I've already shown this in the overview of detoxination, the sauna detoxification using niacin overview. This is actually going to be a lot more in-depth about this program, and if you haven't watched that other video, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of background information on this. So this was a study that was done by Wang et al. Back in 2000, and we didn't even discover this particular study until 2014. But it changed everything about how we do this program. It was the catalyst to actually how we advanced the original Hubbard method to detoxination. So this study was a glucose study on women, and they were using niacin to temporarily increase glucose levels, which it does, but it's not going to be a concern for any diabetics out there. So what you're looking at is the free fatty acid concentrations in the blood plasma on the y-axis, and the x-axis is showing the time. So it was over a 6-hour period that they were taking measurements, and approximately every half hour they would take the samples. And as you can see in the control group, it was pretty flat-lined. Now, the control group and the study group were the same group of women. They just came back a few months later to actually do the study. So what you're seeing in this flat-lined version of the control group is what you can call lipolysis. It's essentially when the ATP energy is being produced and the triglycerides are being broken down into their component parts of a glycerol and 3 fatty acids, and there's millions of these triglycerides in the fat cells. So what happens is, in fact, the triglycerides, when they're broken down into those component parts, are the fuel that the mitochondria need to produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate energy. And the fuel is actually something that also goes out to other cells that are not fat cells, so that they can also use that fuel for the ATP production in the mitochondria. Now, the release of the free fatty acids from the fat cells is measurable in the blood plasma. So you're seeing the concentrations over a period of time where there's probably not a whole lot of activity. I can see a couple of peaks there where they were probably walking or doing something that needed more energy. But you can see that the normal flat line of everyday activity is not going to produce a whole lot of toxins. However, there are toxins being released with the free fatty acids. So as they are leaving the fat cells to go populate and fuel other cells, there's going to be what can be described as a siphoning effect of the toxins coming out of the fat. Now, this is an important thing to understand because this is why chelation and some other detox programs work, because there's always going to be toxins in the blood because you're always releasing releasing free fatty acids in the process of producing ATP, which is whenever you're alive. So now the next piece is the study group. Basically, we're given 500 milligrams of niacin, and that's an important number to understand because in all the studies you'll find either 500 milligrams or 10 milligrams per kilogram, and this is a range. So in fact, women who tend to be of slighter build or less body mass, they're going to be more around the 500 milligram mark when they trigger what I'm about to explain. Whereas with men, because of usually a higher body mass, they're going to trigger more around 10 milligrams per kilogram. So we call that the target niacin dose. It doesn't mean it's the final dose. It means that that's where we know for sure that this effect occurs. And the effect that I'm referring to is called rebound lipolysis. And rebound lipolysis is going to produce about 4 times normal levels of free fatty acids, which will translate to about 3 times the liberation of xenobiotics. Why does this happen? Because when niacin is ingested, it actually has this effect of depressing the body's ability to produce ATP and lipolysis. So there's a reduction in free fatty acids through the first 3 hours. And those first 3 hours are literally the time it takes for niacin to metabolize in the system. Niacin has a half-life of 20 to 45 minutes, and it goes through about 5.5 half-lives before it will finally totally resolve or work its way through your system. And once it's fully metabolized, then the body's able to resume normal lipolysis. However, it invariably overshoots, and this is very measurable. And this overshoot does tend to become 4 times normal levels of free fatty acids, and that increases the toxin liberation from fat by 3 times or 200%. So this is why we put you into exercise and then sauna on our program. And I'm going to show you here in a little bit how the Hubbard method operated, because it's completely different than this. Now, the exercise component is low-impact aerobic exercise, and its purpose is just to get the heart rate back up so that you pump these blood-borne toxins that are at a higher level now out to the dermal regions where they can then be sweated out in the sebaceous sweat of sauna. So the actual type of sauna makes a difference. So we found that although we were using dry saunas for pretty much 36 years, until we learned about infrared saunas, we were literally having to use oppressively hot saunas. And they do tend to run about 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And so people could only sit in a sauna like this one for maybe 15 to 20 minutes before they had to cool down for 5 to 10 or maybe 15 minutes before getting back in to do another sauna cycle. And this will play a bigger role in just a minute on this slide deck. What we did find, though, is that the far infrared saunas have a different mechanism of action, and so they can cause sebaceous sweat to occur almost immediately, because the way far infrared works is it actually heats the body from the inside out. Don't think of it like a microwave. So the water molecules about 1.5 inches deep, from the surface area down to about 1.5 inches into the skin, are affected by these wavelengths that are the far infrared wavelengths. Now, if you have a full spectrum sauna like the one I'm showing in this image, the full spectrum does include the far infrared wavelengths, obviously. In fact, you can see the black panels on the side walls and the back wall and at the bench there. Those are your far infrared panels, whereas the ones on the door are the full spectrum. So the full spectrum saunas are perfectly capable of doing this program, but the far infrared wavelengths are the ones that actually resonate with the water molecules under the skin, about up to 1.5 inches deep. And what happens is, because of the wavelengths of 9.4 microns, which is what we resonate with the sun at, so actually your body right now is putting off 9.4 microns, and we're resonating with the sun when we go outside. So we generate this heat because the water molecules resonate at that frequency or that wavelength. And so you do generate a heat similar to a microwave oven, but this is non-ionizing radiation. So the microwaves are a completely different type of radiation. But anyway, so the far infrared saunas actually do produce a better sweat. And in fact, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, who is renowned as a chemical toxicology expert, so this is a person who you may know the name. Anyway, I am pulling this excerpt from my book, Sauna Detoxification Using Niacin, and I'm going to just read it verbatim here. So, in a presentation at the 2012 Biological Medicine Conference hosted by the Klinghardt Academy in New York City, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt reported on a study he conducted to find just how dramatic the difference in detoxification is between conventional and infrared saunas. Dr. Klinghardt, who is considered an authority on the subject of environmental toxicity and its connection with chronic infections, illness, and pain, said lab results showed that the sweat of people using a conventional sauna was 95 to 97% water, the remainder being salts, while the sweat of those using an infrared thermal system, like the infrared sauna I just showed you, was about 80 to 85% water, and the remaining 15 to 20% was basically the sebaceous sweat containing cholesterol, fat-soluble toxins, toxic heavy metals, sulfuric acid, sodium, ammonia, and uric acid. So you can see that Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt was the reason that we were convinced to switch from dry saunas to the infrared. And here's an example of one of many towels that I have seen throughout the years where the person was sweating out so many different chemicals that they had different stains. So this is a meth cop from New York who came in because of a study he read about that was involving 68 meth cops from Utah. It was called the Utah Meth Cops Project, and that's also a study that you can find on our studies page. Now, the 68 police officers that went through that program were basically involved with meth lab raids, and whenever there was a raid, there was pretty much a melee, and there was a lot of chemicals being thrown around, and people were basically trying to get out of being arrested. So there was always chemicals flying around in these kinds of raids. And that's exactly what happened with this police officer. He was, or a detective actually, he was involved with 180 meth labs in the raids. And so he came in because he saw the results of that other project, and his towels would either be tan, purplish blue, or like the one you see here, which we call a tie-dye towel. And it's interesting that the bluish purple in his towel was pretty well identified as being Drano, the sodium hydroxide that's used in the manufacturing of meth. So the next one is one of our first responders who was at the cleanup efforts at Ground Zero. This towel I've seen, or this picture I've seen in a lot of different places, but this is from the New York Rescue Workers Detox Project. And so the swatch that you can see that was cut out there towards the top of the towel was sent in for a lab test, and it came back morbidly high levels of manganese. And manganese is used, actually manganese is good for the body, but the manganese amounts that his body was excreting was morbidly high levels. So, and I love the butt print on this picture. But anyway, so this is one of many towels that we got from the New York Rescue Workers Project. So I just want to show you, if you've not seen the other video, some of the benefits that our protocol has been known to produce. So these are reported benefits. However, there's a lot of conditions that I've seen reversed with this program. Of course, you can't say you cure anything, and we're not a weight loss program, but weight loss is, or actually I should say weight control, is a huge benefit because we reset the metabolism with this program. So I'm going to show you the differences or advancements from the original Hubbard method to our program. So you can see here that the preferred sauna type for our program is infrared or dry saunas, whereas the Hubbard method exclusively has been dry saunas. In fact, as you've probably already heard, my father did not invent this program. He basically repurposed it for occupational medicine and became a Christian medical director for a joint venture called HealthMed. There was a group of Scientologists who had brought the drug addiction rehab program called the Purification Rundown to the public without the stigma of recruitment. And my father became very interested in their method to detox chemicals because to this day, there's nothing in the medical literature that we didn't publish that talks about how to detox chemicals. Now, there's always been chelation for heavy metals, and chelation works because, like I've told you, the ATP production releases some of these toxins from fat through the release of free fatty acids. So anyway, the difference here between the Hubbard method and our program is pretty substantial, because the first thing is that we understand now that the niacin's purpose is rebound lipolysis, not the flush. So it's based on body weight when we up-titrate niacin. Whereas with the Hubbard method, it's going to be the flush. And in fact, they'll hold you at a niacin dose for many days until you stop flushing at that dose. And a lot of people actually don't get a good detox because they may not even get to the 500 milligrams until they're halfway into their detox program. And the studies that we found show 500 milligrams is where they can predict the type of rebound that we're getting. And we're going to even cover that in greater detail in a couple of slides. So now, niacin is taken with food only when needed on our program. So if you don't need to have, or if it doesn't cause stomach upset, you don't need to have food in your stomach. But if you do have to have food in your stomach, it should not be fatty foods. So any, like banana or fruit, things like that, breads, but nothing that's fatty, because that will slow down the effect of rebound lipolysis. Okay. And then they do have you eat food in the Hubbard method. Now, we added binders. That's another huge advancement to this program. Things like activated charcoal, micronized zeolite, bentonite clay, enteros gel, and several others. And they all have affinities for different things. So depending on the type of toxicity you may have, I may recommend a different binder than the norm, or add a different binder to the protocol. So examples would be things like mold mycotoxins, which we definitely detox. So the mold mycotoxins do better with things like bentonite clay and enteros gel. And in fact, for other types of pathogenic exposures, you might consider enteros gel or bentonite clay. But for heavy metals and positively charged toxins or poisons, you're going to want to have zeolite. And activated charcoal is also very good for a lot of detox programs, but I'll tell you, it does pick up minerals, unlike zeolite. In fact, zeolite is going to actually add minerals to your system because it contains some of the most important things like calcium, magnesium, sodium, chloride, potassium. Did I say that already? So it's got a lot of these things in it, and it's from the environment that it was formed in. And so what happens is because it has a higher affinity for larger atomic weighted or higher atomic weighted materials like heavy metals and positively charged poisons, it's going to actually release the good minerals into the system so that it can pick up the bad stuff. Now, we only use activated charcoal once on a program because it is not safe to use around, or I should say, you shouldn't be using it every day for like a year because it's going to be picking up a lot of minerals. But we will use zeolite 3 to 5 times per day on our program, and that's important because zeolite's action does work beyond picking up what your body just ate. So whatever you just ate may have toxins in it, yes, and it'll pick that up. But it's also going to filter or chelate the blood passing through the villi of the small intestine where your nutrients are absorbed. And more importantly, because the liver can't break down these lipophilic xenobiotics, they come back into the GI tract with the bile acids through enterohepatic recirculation, and so they actually will be brought back in, ideally to be excreted through the feces. However, most of these are lipophilic xenobiotics, and they wind up resequestering in fat. So if you have zeolite in the GI tract, you're going to pick that up. And so this is why it's important to have zeolite throughout the day. Moving on, so the program starts at 500 milligrams with ours, whereas with the Hubbard method, the day you start taking niacin is the day you actually start your counter. Now, for us, we would start most people who've never done niacin at 50 milligrams and then advance each day by about 100 milligrams until you reach the 500 milligrams. So the next thing is that their daily session is 4.5 to 5 hours, and I went through that back in 1986, whereas we've got it down to the 2 hours that are the most important. And that's when the rebound triggers. Their highest average dose is going to be about 5,000 milligrams. I think they've pretty much made that etched in stone. Whereas for a person who weighs less than 200 pounds, and you don't skip any days, you're probably going to reach 3,100 milligrams. Whereas if you are 200 pound or more, you may get up to even 5,800 milligrams. But don't worry, because there is no upper limit to niacin. In fact, niacin has never killed anybody. The pharmaceutical forms of it, the ones that are like the timed release or the extended or slow release, sustained release, all of those are hepatotoxic. The worst ones are the slow release because the liver has to spend more time processing it. But we can't use those anyway on the program. It has to be immediate release niacin, and it has to basically be the purest form of it. So that's the only way we can trigger a rebound. Also the flush. Most of the other ones that are like niacinamide or nicotinamide or inositol hexanicotinate are all going to be the non-flushing form, and so they're not going to be useful for our program. But they don't trigger a rebound anyway. Okay, so their average program days are 21 days, whereas we don't believe that's long enough. 30 days is actually more suitable, and we don't want someone to continue on beyond 30 days because you can actually get into a point where your body is just going to give out on you because you're actually in a heightened state of sympathetic mode, the fight or flight mode. Versus the parasympathetic mode, and what happens is that you're going to be in this heightened state, especially because of the fact that firstly we're liberating toxins at 3 times the normal levels. We're also going to be doing heat stress, exercise. A lot of people have not exercised in a long time. Keep in mind though, this is low impact aerobic exercise. But the thing is that during a program like ours, you're going to be in a heightened state of the sympathetic mode. So once you do 30 days, we want you to stop for 2 weeks. Allow your body to return to homeostasis or back to normal. And then also the first week during that 2-week period, your body resets niacin back to 0 so that you can do another round. So we say take a minimum of 2 weeks off before you do another round. Now this is actually going to come up to the next getting close to it now. Our protocol is clinically validated, and so is the Hubbard method. Now, the average number of programs, we actually do 3 to 5 on average, and the reason is because of our studies. The studies have always shown the body burden reductions are about 1/3, and so in a 30-day program, you're going to get possibly 1/3 of your body burden reduced. This is an average. Everybody's results will differ, but on the Hubbard method, because it was usually 21 days of 4.5 to 5 hours a day in oppressively hot saunas with no binders, most people only went through their program once. And unfortunately, that didn't bode well for some of the studies like the Gulf War Syndrome study, which had great results. But if I had been putting them through the detoxination program, those soldiers, those veterans would have had far superior results. So it's important to understand that this is the reason why we recommend 3 to 5 programs. And by the way, if you've ever had an MRI with gadolinium contrast, even one, I'm going to recommend you do this program 4 times. So it's important to understand and have that as a mindset that you're going to probably need to do this program more than once. And yes, I published the book so that we can talk about detoxination and how much better our program is from the old Hubbard method. So I also want to compare our program with the way the Hubbard method works. Now in reality, the program actually has 20 to 30 minutes of exercise, followed by a 45-minute infrared sauna cycle, followed by a 5 to 15-minute break, and then another 30 minutes. Now you work up to these. If you've never done 45 minutes of straight sauna, you'll work up to it, okay? So don't worry about that. But you'll also probably start with maybe 15 minutes the second sauna cycle and work up to 30. But you want to try to get to 75 full minutes as soon as you can on your 30-day program. Now, the Hubbard method, on the other hand, because of these oppressively hot temperatures, you would only be able to sit in a sauna for maybe 15 to 20 minutes before you had to cool down for 5 to 10. So there was repeated cycles, and I'm talking repeated cycles of sauna time. And it did take a while for the saunas, because of that heating, cooling, it took a while before the body started producing sebaceous sweat. So the fact that they were taking 4.5 to 5 hours a day to get to results had 2 major things going on. Firstly, the niacin rebound was what was actually doing the work. and they didn't know that. So in fact, the reason they didn't know that it was like this was because the original study that my father had was done on sheep. And apparently sheep actually metabolize the niacin within about 40 to 50 minutes. And so they show that the entire time the person is in the sauna, they're going through the rebound. Whereas in reality, the Hubbard method was taking so long because of the saunas being so hot, and people took forever to produce sebaceous sweat, and the fact that the work was being done in the last 2 hours. So if you do only have access to a dry sauna, you can do our program. It's not like they're out of the equation now. It just means that you need to plan to do more sauna cycles than we would do. Now, if you can also tolerate your dry sauna for longer periods of time, you can shorten the window because you don't need to take so many cool down breaks. But as you can see in this, the dry saunas do take a bit longer. It's about a total of 90 to 120 minutes of sauna time. Now, there's not just niacin on this program. You also need, of course, water, hydration, and electrolytes, but there's a lot of moving parts here. So notice that the kit that we recommend that you purchase, which the link will be in the description below, but this is basically the kit that was designed for the Hubbard method. And that means that it does not include binders, but I would recommend that you work with the binders that are on our website in our shop. There's a detox support products or substitutions. Actually, no, this is the detox support products. And so you want to look at the hyaltrophin zeolite and the Takasumi brand of activated bamboo charcoal. But here's the kit that we recommend that people purchase to do the 30-day program. It's good for 30 days for one person, or for two people to do 14-day versions. But I got to tell you, the only time I recommend people do a 14-day version is if they're just doing what I would consider a preventive health type measure, where they've already done 30-day programs and they just want to, like I'll do this every 3 years or so. I'll do a 14-day version. But for most people, you need to do 30 days. And just plan for that. But anyway, the kit's good for 30 days, and it does contain the 3 different levels of niacin, so 100, 500, and 1,000 milligrams, because when we have to dose, we have to overcome the body's tolerance buildup to the niacin each day. So you're going to be increasing your niacin dosing each day. That's why you'll get up to either 3,100 or maybe 5,800 milligrams, because the body builds up a tolerance. And so in order for us to be able to achieve rebound lipolysis, you need to have niacin increasing each day. And for, like I said, under 200 pounds, a person would only take 100 milligrams per day. If you weigh between 200 and 300 pounds, you're going to need to take 200 milligrams per day. And if you weigh above 300 pounds, you're going to do 300 milligrams per day. Anyway, we also use oils, lecithin. Lecithin is great for the fact that it breaks down the oils as an emulsifier, but it also is a primary source of choline, which is important for people who have MTHFR gene variations or polymorphisms, because if you have concerns with undermethylation where your body may not react well with the vitamin B3 because it is a methyl sponge is what it's called, a methyl group sponge, the choline is actually a methyl donor. So we've never had any kind of issues with MTHFR gene variations with this program because it's basically the fact that the choline is supporting the methyl groups. The other thing too is that both choline and niacin are going to support glutathione. So that's another important fact. Also, there's the CalMag beverage, which is a calcium and magnesium. It's actually calcium gluconate and magnesium carbonate beverage that becomes very bioavailable once it's mixed properly with apple cider vinegar, because calcium needs to have its pH reduced so that it's more acidic. The body will then absorb it better into the tissues. And the calcium and magnesium are needed for several functions, especially to prevent muscle cramping and twitching or spasming because of extended sauna time, but more importantly because the bones are storing lead and gadolinium, and so this CalMag beverage will help displace any the lead or gadolinium that's in the bone. But this beverage is separate from the other electrolytes. There's going to be potassium, sodium chloride salt tablets. There's also plasma electrolytes, also known as cell salts. But anyway, the kit's about $230 at this time when I recorded the video, and whatever the shipping is. You can always request a quote for the price of the kit plus the shipping, and if you're in California, also the California sales tax. So if you go to our online shop, you'll find that there's a form at the bottom of the item here, the 30-day supply kit, and just fill the form out. They'll give me your information so I can then get the price quote to you, and I try to get those done within 24 hours. So how can we, or I, help you improve your quality of life and health? So I do offer remote detox coaching. I no longer have a center. The Sacramento Center shut down at the end of 2022 thanks to the COVID lockdowns and the fact that the lease came due, and we decided that we weren't going to try to carry on. So anyway, I now do everything remotely, and I have perfected the technique of working with people, even if you have a gym that you go to for your sauna. But I do recommend that you do get a sauna, because infrared saunas are actually quite affordable, especially the portables. I do not recommend sauna blankets or like the sleeping bag saunas. I do not recommend them, but some people do have them. They can be used, but you're not going to get as effective of a detox as you would with either a portable or a cabin style. So anyway, my remote detox coaching includes the video tutorial course that was recorded back in 2019. It's kind of dated, but it's worth watching if you are a more visual-oriented person. There's the Detoxination Protocol Guidebook, which is always the most updated form of information. It's basically chapter 3 of the book, and it has the most updated information, and there's usually things that I add to it that are more, tips, like pro tips and things like that. And so if you've already purchased our book, it doesn't matter if it's the first or second edition, you can always register at our online book resources page, and you'll be able to download from the Forms and Information Center the updated protocol guidebook. But also there's other forms and information like you can provide to your primary care practitioner if you want them to understand what the program's all about. In fact, I do have a PhD level overview of the program that I'm willing to share with people on request. So anyway, the protocol guidebook, we go through that in an orientation training, which I'll get to in a minute. But the other thing is I help with the acquisition of consumables. So if, let's say you cannot get the kit for whatever reason, it doesn't come to your country, I do have substitutions. I can show you which ones I recommend. And then there is the live protocol training meeting, which is, I usually call it orientation training meeting, but that meeting is something that will spend about 90 minutes, sometimes even 2 hours, but I make sure you know everything you need to know to do this program. So the protocol guidebook we go through, we set up an online workbook, which I haven't mentioned yet, but there's a Google Sheets workbook, which is essentially the log sheet so that I can watch your progress and see if there's any trends that need to be corrected. Things like diarrhea or something that are happening, or headaches, you're getting constant headaches, I can help with guiding you what to do differently. Anyway, so there's unlimited support and guidance with this program, so you can schedule as many Zoom calls, or you can send me emails and texts, things like that, and I will support you throughout. Every time, by the way, continuous coaching for every program. So knowing that people have to do this program more than once, I'm more than happy to work with you each time and set up a new workbook. So just know that that's available. And also, I do support families up to 4 under the same roof. So if you have a spouse or another better half, that you want to have go through the program, or kids up, by the way, minimum age is 4 years old. But there's no maximum that we found, although I pretty much would hesitate to put a 90-year-old through the program. But we have not found an upper age limit. There are preclusions and contraindications, which you should read through, and you'll find that in several places on our website. But that's the remote detox coaching. I also do have a 1-hour protocol training. So let's say you want to go through that orientation training meeting, but you don't want ongoing support. You don't care about the workbook, because actually there's a paper form of it in the protocol guidebook. So you can actually take notes each day on the paper version of it. But anyway, this goes through basically what I would be doing in the first part of the orientation training meeting. So in fact, it'll be live with me, and you get the guidebook, the dosing and timing of all the elements, the mixing of the CalMag and how to dose it properly, and any questions you have, I answer, but there's no ongoing support with this. Then there's a 1-hour video training, and this one is basically the same meeting, except that it's not live, it is recorded. So there's no personal support or answers, but it's, I believe, $49 at this time. So a lot of people are already taking advantage of this service, because if you've already started your own program and you run into some difficulties that you need my guidance with, you can retain me for $75, and that's a 15-minute build increment. So if you get on a Zoom call with me and we spend 15 minutes, talking, that's all you get billed for the time, and so that means you have 45 more minutes. But the emails, there's also email questions that you can send that I'll answer, but they're going to count as about 5 minutes for each email, or each question, really. But the minutes do roll over, so any unused minutes we do roll over, so it's worth it if you've already started your program. And on my online shop, as you can see, getdetoxinated.com/shop, there's more than these items in the shop, but that's all fit on a page, obviously. Anyway, so you can see that like the additional detox products down in the lower right-hand corner. That's where you're going to find the zeolite and the activated charcoal, and some other items that you might find that you would benefit from having for the program. Now, there's one other thing that I have made available for people to download, and it's the instructions for just the straight niacin flush sauna detox as an alternative for people who are not ready to actually start the full 30-day detoxination program. This is actually going to take advantage of the flush, which is something that's too unpredictable, so we don't really care so much about it. But it's also a good primer for doing the full program, because you can actually be doing a niacin flush sauna before you get to 500 milligrams. And that's actually explained in the protocol guidebook. But in here, this can be done whenever you want. I mean, it's simpler, but it's far less effective than our program. There's no time commitment like you have with our program. So anytime you want to use a sauna, consider taking niacin. It causes a flush. The flush pumps any bloodborne toxins out to the dermal regions, and there you go. You're going to get some detox, something better than just sitting in a sauna normally. The instructions are going to be downloadable in the link that you'll find in the description of this video. Because it does exploit the flush, because bloodborne toxins are always there. It's going to pump those out to the dermal regions, and hopefully they'll get sweated out that day. I do recommend, by the way, that you also take binders and, of course, stay hydrated. But this is something you can do just whenever you feel like it. So it only takes 30 to 60 minutes, and you don't have to wait the 3 hours like I was showing you before. So it's essentially a simpler detox, and it just really does do a better job of a detox over just sitting in a sauna. So, if you're not already a member of my Facebook group, I recommend that you join us. We have a pretty large group. It's over 8,000 people at this point, and basically, if you look up sauna detoxification using niacin, my group will pop up. But it is the groups, Facebook.com/detox.ination. Yeah, that was actually done on purpose, because I guess, starting a revolution. I'm building the Detoxination. So anyway, I'd love for you to come join us. Now, I do offer a free consultation, so as a complimentary Zoom consultation. I prefer Zoom because I can do a shared screen and provide more information that way. So phone calls will work, but I prefer Zoom. Anyway, so this is the first item on our heal.me/detox booking system. The orientation meeting, if you've already signed up as a coaching client, when you have all the consumables ready, then you select the orientation meeting, and that will block at least 90 minutes off my calendar. But you can also request a detoxination certificate training consultation too. So if you are interested in becoming a detoxinician, by all means, select that option and schedule a time to meet with me. I'd love to talk with you about it. Also, if you have questions about purchasing saunas, I am very, very knowledgeable and experienced. I've actually been using saunas since 1973. So I have been a dealer for Clearlight. I no longer am. I'm an affiliate because basically I'm making recommendations for other sauna manufacturers, and they did not like that. But I do have many different sauna manufacturers I recommend, and I've owned all 3 of the cabin-style saunas manufactured by Clearlight, Radiant Health Saunas, and Sunstream Saunas. I also do recommend 2 portables, one being Therasage, which is the top of the portable line, and then Relax Saunas. So those are the other 2, and you can find those in my online shop at the Sauna Selector Guide. And with that, we're going to conclude this particular video, and thank you for watching. And again, I look forward to meeting with you with a complimentary consultation. So enjoy the rest of your day.